Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Baseball Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pizzapia, and joining me today from the Fantasy Black Book himself, from Line Star, your friend, my friend, KC Bubba, and we are going to plug in for some power today. That's right. We always need more power in Major League Baseball. We can't get enough of it, and the best kind of power is the kind you can get cheap. That's right. So we're going to be talking about some 10 late-round sluggers in your drafts that you need to target to get your home runs, your RBI, and your run totals padded a little bit. And KC Bubba, my man, my brother from another mother, it is great to see you and have you back on the show and just kind of chop it up again. It's a new year, it's a new season, and it's nice to see your face, buddy.
It's great to see you. It's great to chat it up with you. It's been a little while. We used to do this almost daily, and now it's been a bit, but it's always fun to catch up with you. You're one of the genuine dudes that have helped many of us, including myself, out in this deal. So it's I know you don't like to be flattered and everything, and you know if you guys watch.
No, I love it. In fact,
compliments.
But, say more nice things about me, Bubba. You know, because
we only have so much time in a day. So it's tough.
Okay.
But
all right.
Yeah, as you know, it's a new day. I always think about you when I hear new day. So, but it's great chatting again.
You know, it's funny. I just logged into your Twitter, and because for some reason my phone keeps talking to me, of course you actually popped up there for 2 seconds there. So now I've got to, I don't know if that you had like a double Bubba for a second there.
I heard it for a second. I was like, am I echoing? This is bad.
I thought you were echoing, but no, I pulled up your Twitter and I guess my phone was still on. And this is the beauty of live podcast, right? And there's Bubba talking at the same time as Bubba. All these cross Bubba nations happening.
Too much Bubba for many people.
And again, you can follow KC Bubba over on Twitter at BDentrek. And also make sure you check out his work at Roto Baller. He's there. He does work at Fantrax. And of course, the Bench with Bubba podcast, which is, you know, always one of my personal favorites, which I've been on 1,000,001 times. But before we kick things off here and start diving in for some of those big names for power that you're going to need in your fantasy baseball season in 2022, I want to remind everybody about our cheat sheet creator. And that is hard to say, but I'm going to say it again. The cheat sheet creator at fantasypros.com/draftwizard. Now, this is a great tool that allows you to combine all your favorite experts, i.e. me and Bubba, into one consensus cheat sheet for all your drafts. So if you got best balls, you got NFBC, you got early drafts, whatever you got, the Draft Wizard's got you covered with the cheat sheet creator. And basically every time your experts update their rankings, your cheat sheets get automatically updated thanks to the glory of technology. And you can also further customize your cheat sheets with tiers and player notes. Plus, you can use the cheat sheet creator in both Draft Simulator and Draft Assistant tools on the website during the Draft Wizard when you're doing your draft app stuff going on there. Whenever you're doing your actual drafts, you can use your little cheat sheet creator there as well. So basically, it's this amazing tool, and it's there for you over at fantasypros.com/draftwizard. So go get that cheat sheet creator today. And Bubba, let's kick things off here with one of your names for 10 late round sluggers, because I know that, you know, we can just never have enough power. I always keep saying that. I mean, this is the game. This is where we're at. It's a lot more home runs. It's a lot more strikeouts. So you need a lot of pitcher strikeouts. And if you think you have enough, well, you need a little bit more. And the same thing with power. So finding it late is a huge win. Because obviously, you know, with guys swinging and missing as much as they can, you need to find some of these other guys that are making good, solid contact and hitting the ball over the fence. So give me a name on that list you want to talk about first.
Yeah, first off, I just want to let everybody know that my list, it's like not your probably standard name. I tried to pick some names that kind of people might not pay attention to, and they're post 200 in ADP, so they're later on in your draft. But it's some guys that just like kind of like you to people unless you play DFS or something. And the first one I'm going to go with is Jonathan Scope, a guy that most people kind of usually just look right past when you look at in your fantasy draft. And he comes with dual position eligibility, which is always tremendous. But he's a guy that hit 22 home runs last year, and he's hit 20 or more home runs for 6 straight full seasons, not counting the short in 2022.
Right.
So that's like some insanely great stability in your in your lineup when you can put 20 plus home runs right out the gate. Doesn't crush you an average, hits 250 plus, usually like 270 plus more often than not. And he's going to be hitting in the middle of the Tigers lineup, which, you know, isn't the greatest of lineups, but they've improved. You still have Miggy, who's not bad, but Javi Baez and other Akil Badusis and Grossman, there's going to be production from Jonathan Scope. So if I can pencil in 20 plus home runs like that stability, that confidence behind that, I think that's a big win later in your draft.
I think Scope is a great name, and I don't think it's ill. Actually, if you go back to 2020 and you look at the pace, he was on pace for another 20 plus home run season then too. So, I mean, this is just who he is. And what's been nice about him too, you've seen some early fluctuations in the batting average back in the day a little bit, like he was at the 209, the 233 mark, up and down a little bit. Last two seasons, I know 2020 smaller sample size still, but around that 270 range, that's where you like him to be at this point in his career. And I think going back in the day with Jonathan Scope when he was with the Orioles, the notion was, well, maybe he was propped up a little bit by that ballpark. But I think ever since he's landed, his last few years with Detroit, then, look, hey, this is a good situation for this guy. The power is raw, the power is real. And, I feel like this is a player, as you mentioned too, with a little bit of dual eligibility, especially playing a little second base. That's a huge win for you because second base can be a tough place, and getting some power out of there sometimes can be even tougher.
Definitely, most definitely. I just love what he brings, and it's like if Torkelson doesn't work out or Miggy's going to DH all the time, he slides over to first. He can even DH. Like there's just so much to love about Scope, and gets overlooked quite a bit in drafts.
Now, if you go over to FantasyPros.com and click on the MLB tab, you could see the ADP that we've got going. And Scope right now, as currently constituted, is at 233 overall. So we're talking about Gregory Soto, Austin Hayes, guys like that are kind of in that range. Nicky Lopez is going ahead of him. Cal Quantrill's going ahead of him. It's funny. I look at a guy like Scope and I feel, Bubba, especially from that argument you made with the 20 home runs pretty much every year, you just lock that in late, especially in those leagues where you have those corner spots too, or those middle infield spots. Scope makes a lot of sense. And a lot of times people, I think, devalue those players on bad teams. And,
Yep,
players on bad teams need some love too, right?
They still get at bats, 4 to 5 a game, and they all count the same way. They might not. The biggest thing, the argument I'll listen to on bad teams is runs and RBIs. Sure, they're not going to produce as many more often than not that way. Home runs are home runs. And one thing that got me quite a bit last year is these later round guys I thought would be great, like Christian Walker's of the world and stuff, and they crushed your power. And I'm not saying Christian Walker can't bounce back, but like we said with Scope over and over again, is 6 straight years of 20 plus. You'd be more surprised if he didn't hit you 20 plus home runs than some of these other kind of younger guys you might be taking a chance on.
All right, so number one on the list is Jonathan Scope. Let's go to number 2, Bubba. Who you got?
The ageless one, and many people just think injury prone, but Josh Donaldson at 36 years old keeps getting it done. 26 home runs last year, played in 135 games. If you take out the 2018 season where he only played 52 games due to injuries, he's pretty much played 135, 150 plus games in like 5 of the last 7 seasons. He's been very, very productive. He might miss a game here or there, but even last year, in 135 games, it was only one IL stint, and it was just kind of a lingering muscle issue the rest of the time. And even with that 26 home runs, like I said, prior to that, 30 plus home runs for 4 straight seasons outside, or 4 of the last 5 seasons prior to that. Hits for average will hit in the middle of that Twins lineup. He's a guy that everyone, or most, I should say most, just say, oh, he's injury prone, I can't draft Josh Donaldson. Well, where he's going in drafts, if you can potentially get a 30 home run guy, and he only plays 130 games, and people forget to talk about replacement value so much. If you have an IL spot or you draft properly, you can sit him while he's on the IL, replace him, maybe another 2 or 3 home runs, some stolen bases or something. Think about one position as a player, not just Josh Donaldson. I think he's a very, very nice pick where he's going.
Right now in the NFBC, he's going at 209 over on Fantasy Pros. ADP's at 177 overall. Now, I am concerned about the age and the durability with Donaldson, and it is fair. But I think if I'm going to be more specific, you hit on a good point, Bubba, which is, to me, I look at this and I say to myself, okay, in a season-long league, can I take Josh Donaldson? Can I start him when he's playing, when he's not? Do I have enough guys there? And is it a league that's not too deep that I'm going to find some replacement value on the waiver wire if I need to for the inevitable Josh Donaldson missing games? And I want to say inevitable because I think it is. I think he's not a guy who's going to play 162. It's not going to be the case. But with Donaldson, I think when you're talking about the head-to-head formats for power categories, that pushes me off of him a little bit. I look in that same range, looking at guys like Hunter Renfroe, looking at guys like Robbie Grossman, some other players like that in that general range. Maybe even a Brendan Rodgers too has a lot of upside. I think I'd rather go with those guys, a little bit more of the youth, than I would necessarily go with Donaldson. But in season long, I will venture to say this ADP actually goes further. And you know how you see the ADP sometimes and you get into the drafts as we hit draft season, and certain guys keep getting dropped in your live drafts? I feel like Donaldson's one of those guys because of the age and the injuries. Would you agree with that?
100%. That's kind of what I wanted to highlight him now is, right now you got people drafting right now are quote unquote more the diehards. So
right.
They kind of know, like, this is what this guy really can do. So let's not be crazy and go up here. But the more and more casual players start drafting, or the more drafts in general, he will fall. Definitely will, because you get the hot new name. You get spring training. This guy starts hitting bombs. All like the next Maikel Franco starts crushing home runs everywhere, and they're going to start jumping him. So I'm 100% with you. Question I have for you, just for fun, going like 40 to 45 picks ahead of Josh Donaldson is Justin Turner. Everyone loves Justin Turner. Same concerns to me as Josh Donaldson. He's always on the IL, but people seem to almost look past it because it's the Dodgers per se.
You're right. They do look past it. They love the batting average of Turner too, and I think it's because he plays on a higher profile team at the end of the day. I think that's probably it. I mean, he's had equally the same kind of injury issues, and if you told me I can get Donaldson later, I'll take Donaldson later over Justin Turner, absolutely. So yeah, so that's a perfect argument, and you're 100% right. There will be a premium on Turner over Donaldson without a doubt, and that's not necessarily the right thing. I don't know if I could necessarily justify, especially if it's a huge premium in terms of ADP. Speaking of injuries, take me through the next guy, because this guy's been the injury king oftentimes in his career. But when on the field, it's hard to argue that he can be productive. So who's the name?
Yeah, and the name was AJ Pollock. And most of these guys on this list, they're all going to have at least one big like wart that stands out somewhere along the line. And AJ Pollock's is 100% the injury. It's crazy to think he's actually 34. Like I would have. Yeah, he doesn't feel that old to me, I guess. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but because he's only played like 4 seasons worth of games. I don't know. But when he plays, he's darn near elite. Played 117 games last year at 21 home runs, stole 9 bases. Back in 2018, played 113 games, stole 13 bases, hit 21 homers. It's just a matter of actually getting on the field with AJ Pollock, obviously, which stinks, but it's another one of those deals. If he just plays 110 to 120 games, he can get you 20. If he gets lucky like in 2015 and plays a ton of games, he could just go over the moon for you. Playing on the Dodgers will be huge, especially if that. You got to remember that he could be one that benefits a bit from the DH as well. If it comes over to the National League, these guys let's rest him because he's got a little boo-boo. Instead of having to sit him for 3 days, let's just have him hit. Like we can do things like that. There's a lot that can go right for AJ Pollock to run into maybe 130 games, and now he becomes a 25-plus home run guy on a very good team that's going to have a lot of run production.
That's a great point there. And I wonder, too, about Justin Turner on the Dodgers, who we just talked about, too, how much a potential DH will help all of those guys. I think the Dodgers would be a team that would certainly benefit, and some of those guys they have on their roster that have been injury-prone.
They won't have very good. They won't have one designated DH. They
won't have Nelson Cruz, right?
They said in 2020, we're using it as a day off. We're rotating through this. Now, the only caveat is if Max Muncy's UCL injury is as bad as it is, and all he can do is hit. That's the only caveat.
That is true. And Muncy's some power, too, that might be some cheap power to pay attention to, depending on how far his draft stock slips. But yeah, man, I mean, 21 home runs last year, 69 ribbies. He scored 53 runs. Now, he played in only 116 games, but I think that when you're constituting your teams and your rosters, when you look at AJ Pollock, Bubba, it feels like that's a guy that a lot of people won't even touch. Like, if you're in a 12-team league, there's probably 6 people, half the league, I would imagine, don't even want anything to do with him. And then the other 6, there's 3 of them that will take him if the price is right, and 3 that are the crazy risk takers that will always take him. I think if you're kind of one of the 3 that, if the price is right, then AJ Pollock can be a useful player. And he's got a little bit of speed, too. He still stole 9 bags. So, once again, this comes down to, I think, the season-long formats versus the head-to-head formats. Any head-to-head, AJ Pollock's a liability because you have to replace him, or he comes out and you end up losing a week because he's not there for the rest of, he gets hurt on a Tuesday and then you don't get to play him the rest of the week. That hurts you. But in season-long, if you can manage it, I like him as a depth piece. I agree.
And most of my analysis is going to be all for like roto formats deals. Like I rarely play head to head. Just for anybody that's curious, like that's to be most of my analysis. And the thing with Pollock, he's much more available for these like draft and holds, best balls makes a lot more sense. But also, like you said, in a 12-team league, I think people need to kind of look at just your roster construction. You can take more chances because the replacement value is so much better. 15-team league, you need that stability. So Pollock makes for a great 12-team option because if he does get hurt, say it's a serious injury. Well, we move on, and there's actually something you can use behind there.
Interesting, too, when you go back and look at the at-bats, too. In 2018, he had 413 at-bats, hit 21 home runs. Last year, 383 at-bats, hit 21 home runs. So, it's not an impossibility. And boy, was he good in 2020, too. I mean, you go back and look at that 2020 season, what a run he was on. Again, small sample size because it's a shortened season. But at the same time, those 16 home runs, I kind of wonder if Pollock's another one of these guys like Buster Posey who benefited from that short season a little bit. Some of those older guys who the little tread on the tires, that shortened season seemed to rejuvenate a lot of those guys in 2021. Did you have that same kind of feeling?
Definitely. Just, there's a lot to be said about the wear and tear on some of these guys. Baseball's a grind. People think it's, not as crazy because it's not as physical as football and stuff, but every single day, hotels, airplanes, like they don't get many days off. So it's a wear and tear on the body for sure.
All right, let's switch gears here from the enough of the older guys who are always hurt. Let's talk about a young player. Give me a young name here who you think could be a nice late round power get for you.
Yeah, some might think it's crazy because we didn't see Joe Adell, be that productive last year. He did it 23 home runs in the minor leagues last year, but only four in 35 games, 140 plate appearances in the bigs. Only hit 246. Not the things that scream awesome, but this guy has some of the best prospect pedigree in baseball. And I always like to say, you know what? I'm going to cherish those 140 plate appearances. That's called experience. That really helps this kid out. Now he gets to go into spring training with some confidence. He's like ready to rock and roll. And on top of that, he had the 2020 season where he got to play as well. So it's just piling upon each other. And I think we're going to see a big breakout from Joe Adell. And if that does happen, this is a guy with at least 20 home run upside. We could see more with stolen bases, like the total package. He's a 5-tool type player. So I think Joe Adell is one of those guys that, everybody wants to go get your Bobby Witts in your drafts. You want to go, Jared Kalenic still getting drafted at a decent price tag. Joe Adell's going late in drafts. Jaron Duran's another guy going late in drafts. Some of these young prospects that I think we were all hyped on last year, kind of forgot about them. Joe Adell is one that can get you a lot of power for a very nice discount.
He's the definition of post high sleeper right now because Joe Adell 2 years ago was all anybody could talk about Bubba, and I think this is actually one of the things where the shortened season hurt the younger players, in my opinion. It hurt the younger guys because they didn't get as many at-bats. They didn't get as many opportunities. The whole season was all weird in the minor leagues, right? And Joe Adell had some injuries too. So for me, when I look at Joe Adell, I see so much upside. He is going right now. The ADP over on FantasyPros for him is 247 in the consensus, 236 in NFBC. Just to give you guys an idea, we're talking like this is the same realm of like Harrison Bader, Kiki Hernandez, Mike Zunino. I mean, those kind of names right now. None of those guys have the potential, as you said, overall productivity, power, speed combination that Joe Adell has. And it's kind of fascinating to me. Here's another name, too. It's kind of funny in that same range. At 240's Kevin Biggio, somebody else that last year was my big bust of the year. I circled last year in the offseason, came to fruition. But that's another young player, too. I want to ask you this. In this vacuum here, in the 240 range, Kevin Biggio or Joe Adell, who would you rather take a shot on?
I'm still going Joe Adell, and a lot of it's just my
Me too.
brain and roster construction because you usually need 5 outfielders and all these different aspects to it. And with Biggio, I'm still not 100% sure on the playing time. And Adell could get screwed over on playing time too because they have tons of options there and, Trout healthy and everything. But I just like what I know from Adell's pedigree more than Biggio's for now. Could be totally wrong.
Yeah, also names that are close to Joe Adell right now in terms of ADP, Gio Urshela. Like I know what that guy is. I mean, I know what Joe Adell can be. And this is the difference of trying to win a draft. And I'm not saying like you can't draft an Urshela or you can't draft a Will Myers. Of course, that's perfectly fine. You know what these guys are. But there's something about a player like Joe Adell where we really haven't seen him at his best at the major league level. And you pointed out, had a good minor league season. Let's not crush this guy. And it's not that we got this bad about guys like Vlad, but it's just so funny to me, Bubba. We overhype as a fantasy community the young guys. And if every guy doesn't come out of the gate and hit like Juan Soto, all of a sudden we dismiss them right away. And you can't be more wrong about that.
Yep. Yeah, there's a perfect example on his own team. It's like oversaid time and time again, but Mike Trout was horrible his first time. And I think most can agree one of the best hitters we've ever seen play baseball.
Absolutely.
So it's just and you got to think about that with Adell from a total package. Hopefully he gets Rendon back this year. Hopefully he gets Trout back this year. You have Ohtani, you have Walsh. Like you have these tools around him that's just going to make him a better offensive player and the team a better offense. And that can only benefit him, not hurt him.
All right, give me another name. Who is next on the late round power hitting list of KC Bubba?
Big Bobby D. Bobby Dahlbeck. This guy, the running joke I used going into last season was he's either going to swing and miss and strike out or he's going to hit a home run. This is what he does. He hits the ball hard. It's like the old caveman idea. See ball, hit ball hard. That's what Bobby Dahlbeck does. But we saw improvements on the plate discipline, the strikeout rates last year, especially in that second half of the season. He was just crushing everything. He was hitting for average. He was driving in runs. The monster was his friend because he just hit it over it. They were friendly with each other. It's a beautiful thing with him. And there's still questions. Can this be sustainable for Dahlbeck? Because he's proven to be a huge swing and miss guy his entire minor leagues. But even if, he's just one of these guys that strikes out like 33% of the time instead of 43%, that's tremendous. tremendous for a guy like Dahlback. This is one of the few guys later in drafts, and he's been moving up boards. I think he's going to keep moving up boards. That could legit get you 35 to 45 home runs. Like I call him Big Meat Pete Jr. Like if you don't want to get Pete Alonso early, but you want something similar to Pete Alonso.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Pete Incaviglia. That's what I thought.
My nickname is Big Meat Pete the Polar Bear. That's like Pete Alonso. But with Bobby Dahlback, he's not going to hit the same average as Alonso, but you can get a lot of similar tools a lot later in the draft.
I know I made someone smile just because I said the name Pete Incaviglia on this podcast.
Philly legend.
That's right. A Texas Ranger before that. People forget. Not this brain.
Yeah,
this
but
brain
I remember Incaviglia with that greasy mullet.
And my God. All those guys in Philly.
Truck and Dalton and all those guys.
Early 90s Phillies, man. Yes. I remember walking in Philadelphia. I went to college in Philly. And I remember my freshman year of college, right in front. I was walking on Broad Street, and right in front of me walked Lenny Dykstra and his entourage, and they walked right into Ruth Chris, and I just kind of heard the doorman who opened the door going, "How's it going, Nails?" And I turned around, and I saw Lenny Dykstra, those guys, and the mullet on this guy and all these guys, it was fabulous.
It was amazing. And
fabulous
two guys that have issues with the whole hair thing. It's more of a jealousy thing, I think.
Oh, for me, I totally.
I'm with you. Yeah.
I'm. Look, if I had the choice between bald and mullet, I'd probably still go bald.
Yeah,
but
I've embraced it. So
depends on how glorious the mullet is. But going back to Bobby Dahlback, here's the question with him. Now, if you're in an OBP league, that OBP, because of all the swing and miss, right, was down to 298 last year. Yeah, tough. Can you still roster Bobby Dahlback if you do it properly and you have enough OBP? Can you take that cheap raw 25 to 30 home run power that he's probably going to give you regardless? And are you willing to take that chance with the proper roster construction? Or are you really concerned that it's kind of like, the power is great, but it's going to hurt you so much in OBP that it becomes almost kind of like a bad situation?
I'd like to say you can. You definitely can, because there's some elite. Like if you go get like a Juan Soto or Bryce Harper, right? Some of these guys that jump off the page in OBP, you have a cushion. Go get a catcher. Go get Grandal. Like go do certain things that kind of get that elite guy at a certain position, and you can definitely build around that.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I think if you get the elite guys, you can take a shot on. It's like what people used to do with Joey Gallo, but Gallo people thought would hit 35-40. I don't know if Bobby Dahlback's quite there yet. So that's the 5 names so far. Bubba's given us Jonathan Scope, Josh Donaldson, AJ Pollock, Joe Adell, and Bobby Dahlback. And Bobby Dahlback, just in case I didn't mention it, was at 236 in terms of the ADP on FantasyPros, and NFBC is at 227 right now. So those are 5 names we've got in the books. Give me 5 more. Let's start with number 6 on the KC Bubba top 10 late round slugger list.
Oh man, KC will be pumped. Adam Duvall.
I'd have to tell a story about you. When KC Bubba was a child, he always wanted to be a podcaster. His father bought him a microphone at the age of 5, and he would sit there and talk to his stuffed animals. People have no idea what that. Actually, you know what? Scratch that. If you got the Pete Incaviglia reference, you got the KC Kasem for sure. So you're good. You're good either way.
You don't know KC just from his New Year's Eve ball drop. You actually know KC Kasem. But yes, my 6th off the board is Adam Duvall. 38 home runs last year. Power has never been an issue with Duvall. It's been playing time. In 2016, 2017, he played over 150 games. Got you over 30 home runs each go round. The Braves showed that they actually wanted to run him out there after they traded for him from Miami. There's no reason why they shouldn't want to run him out more often than not. He could fall back into platoon if things don't go right, but his power is legit, and he's going to get you 30-plus bombs. The average is going to suffer a bit, but in that offense with Acuna coming back, hopefully they re-sign Freddie Freeman, Albies and company, runs galore will be available, 113 RBIs last year. Adam Duvall just feels like one of those guys because like Soler had the big postseason and everything, that Duvall's kind of getting overlooked in this situation.
That's fair.
And he is a massive piece of what they did and a massive power source later in drafts.
I mean, it was an incredible run last year for him too. Still is the batting average. That's always been the issue for him, is making enough contact. So when we talked about, the OBP for Bobby Dahlback, then it becomes about the batting average. Same question for Adam Duvall. So who are those offset guys? I mean, is it still like the Harpers and the Sotos of the world, right? The guys. I mean, Soto's going to probably hit 320, right? I mean, he's got to be somewhere in that range. So if you have one of those guys, can you stomach having a Duvall later on?
100% for a few reasons. A, there's only like 5 or 6 guys on few trust projections that are projected to hit over 300 to begin with. So the biggest argument that I want to try to pound into people's head is batting average is not what it used to be. A
Well,
good
that's for
batting
sure.
average now is closer to like 250 because Joe mentioned earlier all the strikeouts now. So if Duvall can hit you 235, he's not going to crush you like the old days of Adam Dunn crushing you. Like this is legit. Um, you might not even take a Soto type to fix it. It could be a guy that hits like a Gene Segura that goes into 285. That can
Now,
help
the
you a
question
ton.
is playing time too, because 146 games
Yes.
last year, he had fallen into a platoon spot, going back into the 2019 season. So, do you think that there's enough at bats here on an everyday basis for Duvall to warrant that, or even if there isn't in a season long roto league, would you still want him on the roster anyway and just kind of pick your weeks to play him?
I think there's at bats for now. Obviously, there's holes like do they bring Eddie Rosario back? Do they bring Jorge
Right.
Soler back? There's a lot of questions there for now. There's definitely a spot. The other thing is he is the perfect candidate for the designated hitter. The
Yes, that is
perfect
true.
candidate. Like
Well,
he
I
fits
mean,
that
let's talk
mold
about that,
beautifully.
Bubba, because don't you think? I mean, I know it's the 26th of January, but it feels just kind of like a foregone conclusion, right? I feel like we all think it's going in this direction. So
Yeah.
Duvall is another one of these prototypical guys, and it's funny because if you look at the list so far that you've compiled, it's a lot of guys in the National League there that you feel like are going to
Mhm.
benefit from that potentially, right? It's the Duvalls, some of the guys we talked about, like Justin Turner, we mentioned, we talked about AJ Pollock, like there's going to be some guys now that all of a sudden in the National League who used to be platoon guys are all of a sudden going to get a bump and maybe an
Yep.
extra 50 at bats, and that's a huge, huge difference
Tremendous.
maker.
Tremendous. And it's pretty much they've already said in the negotiations that that's a done deal. Like both sides want
Right.
that. So it's once the
I
CBA gets
want
agreed
that. If
upon,
I have to
yeah,
watch some of these slapnut pitchers hit, still, I'm going to.
yeah.
I just can't handle it anymore, Bubba. It's so bad.
I'm a traditionalist, and I even want the designated hitter.
So
So
am
let's
I.
just get over it.
Let
Yeah.
me be clear. I am
Yes.
the same way as you. You know that I'm a National League guy. I'm
Yeah.
from New York originally. I grew up with the '86 Mets. I love National League baseball. It's my deal. But when a guy is a great pitcher, he doesn't hit in high school. He doesn't hit in college. He doesn't hit in the minor leagues. He doesn't hit in the American League. And they expect this kid to pick up a bat and go hit Jacob DeGrom. It's not happening. Like
Nope.
it's a
And
joke
he
at this
swings
point.
out his shoes and he pulls his oblique. This is what
Right, and
happens,
then right,
folks.
he's out for 6 weeks, and you go, oh,
Yep.
what the hell? Oh, it's the
Yep.
worst, absolute worst. All right, so Adam Duvall, number 6 on the list. Let's go to number 7. Who's next?
This is a tricky one because if you want to talk playing time concerns, we got him right here. This is always a tricky one with Miguel Sano, but even in limited time, the power is legit. He's a guy that I have trouble drafting. I'm going to put that out there 100%. But played 135 games last year. Most of his career hit 30 home runs. He's hit 25 or more home runs 4 out of the 7 seasons he's played in baseball. It's literally give me like 120 plus, and I'm going to be confident in my power source. If somehow he runs into some good health and plays more often, he's going to be tremendous. Similar to Duvall, massive batting average concerns with Sano, but the power is very, very legit. And if again, 30 plus upside later in your drafts, a fun one to think about at least.
I feel like you just have to have patience with Sano. Like
Yep.
there's gonna be a bad stretch in there, and it's just can he get a good one too? I think that's at the end of the day what it always looks like to me with Miguel Sano. And Miguel Sano, if you go back to the beginning of the Miguel Sano story, this was a can't miss slam dunk. Like we're talking about building the franchise around Miguel Sano. Like before there was the Byron Buxton hype, it was the Miguel Sano hype. And I feel
Mhm.
like it's a player that he's never really asserted himself. I mean, he's 6'4", 272 right now. That's a big boy.
Yep.
I don't think he's ever, if Miguel Sano ever applied himself the way Vlad Guerrero applied himself last year in the offseason, I feel like we would get, and I don't mean apply as like just because he's a bigger guy. I mean, David Ortiz
It's
was a
true
bigger
though.
guy. There's a
I'm a
lot of
big
bigger
dude. I
guys.
get it.
Playing big and playing heavy are two different things. And I've said this
Yes.
on shows with you all the time. And it's, to me, one of these things with Miguel Sano is it shows up, and it's unfortunate. And the year where he came in to camp in great shape, he had the 34, home run season, 105 games. He looked really good. So I just feel like it always ebbs and flows with this guy. But right now, Bubba, it's hard to argue because at 250 in ADP and
Exactly.
262 right now, NFBC, I mean, how many guys in the post 250 range have a realistic shot of hitting 30 home runs? I don't know if I can find one
Not many.
besides him.
Like it's crazy because we've never seen, like I said, 135 last year was the most. But let's just say, like, what if he runs hot and plays 145 to 150 games? That's a big if, like a
That's
humongous.
a
That's like
huge if.
95th
That's a
percentile, probably.
272
Yeah,
pound if is
yeah.
what that is.
That's probably like 99th percentile, like
Right.
things. Like, but those are the kind
And
of
if
things.
he's listed at 270 on Baseball Reference,
Yeah,
We know it's more like 285.
Hey, as a Giants fan here, I've seen Pablo come in the best shape of his life. By June, he's back to 320. This is what these boys. So, like, let's be real about the grind of the road. It's not just aches and pains; it's bad food.
Oh
So,
yeah, sure.
so it stinks because the hit tool's never been a question, but it's just the health, and if he can do it, it's gonna be tremendous. And like you said, where he's getting drafted now, in years past, it felt like it was like more like 150, 160. So we're getting like 100 picks of value, and most of these guys are so late in drafts, like in a 12-team league. You can drop these guys. Like these are things you can do if things go wrong. You're not having to sell out in a third round and hope this guy gets it for you. These are when you can take gambles. He could be your backup. He could be a bench player at that point in the draft. Like there's so many things you can do.
No, I'm with you, man. I mean, because when you look at the names of some of the bats in that 250 to 300 range, there's nobody really shows up there you think is going to have like, yeah, that guy can have a 30 home run season. And sure, all these guys have warts. That's why they're post 200 picks to begin with. Yep. But I mean, last year if you had Adam Duvall, I mean, that was a league winner. 38 bombs from Adam Duvall for nothing, or off the waiver wire more likely.
He was a waiver wire.
I was gonna say, it's amazing. In most leagues, he was a waiver wire pickup. So, I mean, you got to love what you're getting out of him. All right, let's go to number 8 on the Bubba list for 10 late round sluggers. Who's next?
This is one that's tough for me because I've already said on Twitter my kind of disdain for drafting this individual. But if you are a Luke Voit believer, there's no denying the power that he brings. My biggest concern is playing time. Like Sano has better playing time skills than Luke Voit, and that just tells you everything you need to know. Voit played 118 games in 2019. His next closest was 68 last year. He does not play games. Still hits for tons of power whenever he plays. Hits for a decent average whenever he plays. But the playing time's not there. They even went and traded for Rizzo last year. Mm-hmm. Now Rizzo's not there, so it's technically Voigt's job as we speak. So that's why you can get some value at this point in the draft because he's going extremely late. There's still rumors they might go and get Matt Olson or someone. We'll see. But if, come opening day, it's Voigt's job again until he gets hurt, and maybe he runs hot and stays healthy. This guy is another guy that literally does have 30-plus home run potential if he can put together a decent season.
I got to say, for me, if I'm the Yankees, I don't think I go back to this Luke Voit well. I don't think I do.
I don't blame you.
And I think that you have to, this is where you sort of have to build things in a little bit. And I think because it's a Yankee issue and because he's had some really good Yankee moments there, that I think you look at and you go, well, maybe you can justify going down to that well one more time. It's the Yankees. There's a lot of attention on a team like this. This is like the polar opposite of the guys who play for the bad teams, right? The Jonathan Scopes, who don't get enough credit for their 20 home run seasons. And then Luke Voit, who, because he plays for the Yankees, he gets too much credit for his 20 home run seasons because his 20 home run seasons are incomplete, basically. So that's kind of where I struggle with him. And if you go back and look at him too, I mean, against right-handed pitching last year, he hit 227. That's a tough one right there. He did have 8 home runs, but still, you just got to make a little bit more contact. And you know what the ironic thing is? It wasn't like he was a world beater at home last year, because in Yankee Stadium last year, it was a 753 OPS. It wasn't anything incredible. He had 216 batting average, a 292 OBP. This wasn't a guy that was lighting up Yankee Stadium. I feel like there's almost like a weird bloom on this rose that doesn't deserve to be there. And I think the Yankees would serve themselves better if they found another guy to play first base for them on a regular basis.
He fits a platoon, like you mentioned. He can hit lefties fine if you want to. I know Yankee fans won't want to hear that.
Or what about a National League DH job? Like a National League team might look at him and say, hey, let's get this guy a DH spot.
He'd be great paired up with like Kyle Schwarber somewhere. Both you guys DH. Sure. Here you go. And I'm with you. It's the Yankee thing because I can't remember where I put him in the black book, but I know like on my rankings, he's easily, I don't even know if I ranked him, honestly, in my top 30. And
it's hard to because he's incomplete.
But it's the bloom thing because, you go put stuff on Reddit or whatever, and oh my goodness, the Yankee fans come out and think you're the worst person in the world for not.
Luke Voit is the reincarnation of Don Mattingly. He's so good. He's so good. Don't even tell me how good he is. Nah, look, man. And I'm not trying to kill Luke Voit because Luke Voit's got power and Luke Voit has potential. But, it's only so many times I feel like you give a guy a shot to prove that he can be an everyday player. 118 games in 2019, right? He had the 21 home runs. Obviously, the shortened season for him was incredible. And I think that gave everybody a false sense of security. And then you got 2021 where he played just 68 games and had the 11 home runs and the 239 batting average. So I'm saying it's very risky for the Yankees to bring him back again and do this to themselves. And, I mean, if you were the Yankees, would you rather have Rizzo or would you rather have Luke Voit? I know you got to pay more.
Rizzo, 100%. Like, I'd have Rizzo, Brandon Belt. Like, there's any of these lefty guys. Just give me one of them. and fit it in. There's so many options you could put there. Heck, put Gallo at first base if you want to. Put someone else in
And
the outfield.
Luke Voigt is at 219 on Fantasy Pros ADP list, and an NFBC. Check this out, Bubba. 271 in NFBC.
Yeah.
So the Sharps really off the Luke Voigt. And is that something that's a red flag for you when you see that? When you see like, okay,
100%.
the general consensus of this guy, like CBS ADP has got him at 176. We've got him at 219. But then NFBC with the Sharps, like the people who are spending big money on these leagues, 271, that should be a red flag, shouldn't it, for everybody who's a casual fantasy baseball player?
100%. That's one thing I preach on my show is like I play in NFBC, but I also play elsewhere. Like I like to play with the masses at times too, but there's a reason that we use NFBC ADP a lot, and it's people that put their money where their mouth is. Like if you're willing to put multiple hundreds of dollars on a league, you better know what you're doing. Like not all of them do. I've seen some people that just throw it all away, but there's something to be said about looking at that ADP, and it definitely stands out, and that's why I use that ADP a lot in my analysis is for different players. It shows a kind of a story to where most of the sharper minds are looking at players.
Yeah, agree 100%. All right, let's go to the next one. Number 9 on the list. My goodness, time is flying while we're having fun here. Give me number 9 on the top 10 late round slugger list, Bubba.
Why draft Luke Voigt when you can go get boring old Jesus Aguilar? Like it's a beautiful thing, Mr. Jesus Aguilar, because 22 home runs last year in 131 games. He's played 130 or more games in 4 straight full seasons, 2 seasons of 20 home runs or more. And in those and he's hit for 260 or better in 3 of those 4. This is a guy that's tremendous. There's platoon issues potentially because they have Lewin Davis there who they want to get more at bats at first base. But Aguilar, like we've heard him, younger players like Jazz Chisholm and others talk about how much of a role he plays in that locker room. And so he's going to stay out there and play in that lineup a lot. And he's so underappreciated year in and year out of what he provides. RBI-wise, he's tremendous. Power-wise, and even, like I said, batting average does not crush you. I'm a huge late-round Jesus Aguilar guy, especially in deeper formats. And he's a guy that could easily get you 20-plus. We've seen 35 a few years back in Milwaukee. The ballpark in Miami hurts him a lot. And that's probably why you won't see the 35 again, but 25 to 30, very possible.
It's so funny. It's going to go back to the Casey Kasem discussion about the chart and the up and down the charts here, because we predicted in the Black Book a few years ago the Jesus Aguilar breakout, right? He's a free player. Take a shot on this guy. He was an RBI machine when he was in the Cleveland system. He just was never given the proper playing time, right? He got the proper playing time in Milwaukee. It was a great ballpark factor. He crushed it. Then he was overrated going into the next year. Black Book, we all talked about it. We were completely off him. That's it. No more. We can't go back to that well again, even though it was so good and it's very tempting. Don't do it. And now you're looking at the ADP sitting at 297 on Fantasy Pros, 285 on NFBC. I agree. It's kind of a boring 25 home run guy, but I think that team is getting better around him, Bubba. And 100%. I think with a little bit better lineup protection and a little bit better guys in front of him and behind him, you're getting a situation where maybe some of those secondary stats, even though the ballpark factor hurts him, maybe the secondary stats make a slight upward tick just because collectively, I think you're going to see a better Marlins lineup on the field. Do you agree with that?
Completely agree. We saw over 90 RBIs last season. Like that's outstanding for a Marlins player coming in there, and the team will be better because I'm a huge Jazz Chisholm fan. People might that's an argument I've had many times, and I'm going to die on that.
No, I like Jazz too. No, I like
2020 upside right there, and that means a whole lot of runs scored
too. Yep. And once again, we like the metrics here. I'm not going to dump on the metrics, but I just want to say the metrics aren't everything. Watch how a player plays. Watch the games, because if you watch the games, that stuff shows up in the box score. The taking the extra base, which gets you another run, then and all these little things that Jazz Chisholm can do, and he's just a little raw right now. But going back to Jesus Aguilar, if you go back and look, this was a guy that had 100 RBI seasons in the minor leagues. Like he was an RBI machine in the minor leagues, which people tell me all the time, well, it's not a skill. BS. It absolutely is a skill. Hitting with runners in scoring position matters, and there's certain guys who, when you put that on them, they don't fare well. And there's other guys like Jesus Aguilar, who's always had a nose for driving in runs. Driving in 90 runs for the Marlins last year is amazing. Is a feat. And if you can tell me right now he's got a shot at the century mark, I believe you. In fact, if you set that over-under number to me at like 92, I would say over with Aguilar as long as he stayed healthy. I think he can get closer to that 98 mark.
Definitely a health thing. And it's like you said RBIs aren't a skill. Well, they just elected someone to the Hall of Fame yesterday that was Mr. Clutch. So it's definitely a skill to drive in runs. put it that
Yes,
way.
we'll talk about that after because I think we're gonna have a little bit
Yeah.
of time. I want to get the Bubba feels about that. So give me one more. Give me number 10 on the list of late round power that we want to add to our lineups.
Well, similar to the Bobby Dahlback vein, a guy that's going to probably hamper you in batting average because he strikes out way too much. 40%, almost 41% K rate last year.
Yikes.
It's bad even in the minors. And the minors is more like a 25 to 29. So maybe there's some positive regression coming your way as he gets comfortable in the bigs. I don't know. But in 106 games, Patrick Wisdom hit 28 home runs. He's hit over 30 in the last few years in the minor leagues. The power is as legit as it comes. Like very, very good. It's the plate discipline that is very, very scary. So if you can build your team properly and sustain some average hits, like we talked about with Bobby Dahlback, and it's a position third base, which is very tricky in fantasy this year, especially after the first 10 or so. It starts getting real murky real quick. Patrick Wisdom's the guy that you're going to want to keep on your radar if you're in need of power late, as long as you're okay on the rest of your squad.
I struggle with Wisdom. Just generally speaking, and I struggle with Patrick's wisdom.
I had so many jokes for that.
I know. And as soon as I said it, it was like one of those cartoon bubbles where I knew it was gonna come out, and I was like, "Wait, let me make sure I make fun of myself before Bubba makes fun of me."
Hates me for my dad jokes. I would have had like 12 of them.
Oh, but that's the problem. He's surrounded by you and me all day, and I mean, all of us just dropping dad jokes. Yeah, I mean, the three of us just constantly dropping dad jokes on him. How could he possibly survive? And he just has cats, so he just doesn't get it.
It's a cat person.
But with Wisdom, 30-year-old guy. 29-year-old player last year with the breakout. If you go back and look at the minor league numbers, they're not impressive. I mean, they're just not. A 440 slugging and a 244 batting average with a 319 OBP, 759 OPS. Like, that's over almost 900 games, too. It's a big sample size where Patrick Wisdom, to me, it is a tough sell, but I'm looking at the Cubs and I'm saying, are there at-bats there for him? Yep. And I think it's hard not to think that there is because they are a team in complete turnover right now. So just from the opportunity standpoint, if he plays 120 games, you got to figure at least 20 bombs are in there. They're not going to be pretty, but it's got to be somewhere around 20 to 25, right?
At least. Like we saw the 28 last year. It's one of those, if he gets the right windy days in Wrigley, he could easily have a 2 or 3 home run game. Like he's just goofy like that. Mm-hmm. He could also have 3 weeks where he doesn't get you a hit. Like those are very, very possible out there. Similar, like you mentioned, Sano being streaky. I think you're gonna get a lot of streakiness with Patrick Wisdom. But you hit on a big thing there is, plate appearances are king, and he's gonna get probably as many as he can handle with the Cubs this year, because this is a team in the rebuild that needs to know which ones of these young kids are going to be able to keep going with them. Like they're trying all these guys out, and he's one of the top guys that they want to really see if is it just power, or do we have something we can work on and build here.
And look, we've seen guys, late bloomers. It happened. I mean, Nelson Cruz was a late bloomer, for God's sakes. But I saw more in the minor leagues from Nelson Cruz. And there's some other guys, too, you see a little bit more. That's where I always struggle. It's the same thing where I remember when Gio Urshela a couple years ago, who just came up earlier in the podcast, when he had that breakout season a couple years ago for the Yankees, I was like, guys, this is like a 700 OPS player in the minor leagues for like 1,000 games. Let's not go crazy about this guy who had one good run. And sure enough, it was one good run at the end of the day. But Wisdom, just for everybody else's knowledge, is going at 292 over in the ADP on FantasyPros 309, which feels about right. But look, when you get late into drafts, you're looking for playing time, I feel like, Bubba, right? Isn't that the thing? You're looking for guys that there's a lot of shots you can take, and this young player, and I just want him on my roster and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, you need guys who are getting steady at bats, and Wisdom might have that path again this year in 2022, right?
That's the biggest thing. It's steady at bats late in your drafts. That's one of the biggest things late in these drafts is you're getting platoon players, you're getting so many question marks. With Wisdom, you're going to get a guy that, as long as he's healthy, is going to probably play 75 to 80% of the games at third base for the Cubs, if not more. So all things considered, 400 to 450 at bats potentially. There's a lot of value to be said about that, because even if he's not in for a great average, the counting stats should be there with runs and RBIs, and it just adds, because he's going to hit in the middle of the order. So as bad as they're going to be, they're probably going to walk Wilson Contreras 120 times this year because they have no reason to pitch to him. There's going to be chances for Wisdom to get you counting stats too. Like, there is merit to it. I'm with you. I've had trouble kind of grasping it. I have 0 shares so far, but it's one of those, if the draft goes a certain way and you go with the flow of the draft, he might fit a build where it makes sense.
Here's a fun one, too. Just pointing this out there. We're talking about the differences in ADP, right? He's 292 over on FantasyPros in terms of consensus ADP, which is great. That's what you want to look at, the consensus. And NFBC, he's 309. If you look at Jesus Aguilar is 285. And I agree with that. I would take Jesus Aguilar ahead of Patrick Wisdom. But The consensus ADP for Jesus Aguilar is 297, 5 spots lower than Patrick Wisdom at 292. So very interesting. You're talking about a player who's got a much bigger gap in NFBC between him and Jesus Aguilar, and I'd rather have Aguilar. Give me the boring guy who I could just kind of set and forget, as opposed to the 29-year-old breakout candidate who, now I'm asking him to follow up. And we've seen it. I mean, we have seen it.
Yeah.
It's not impossible, but certainly those are some interesting names. And just to recap them all real quick for you: Patrick Wisdom, Jesus Aguilar, Luke Voigt, Miguel Sano, Adam Duvall, Bobby Dahlback, Joe Adell, AJ Pollock, Josh Donaldson, and the incomparable Jonathan Scope. Those are 10 late-round sluggers for your Wednesday afternoon here as we're recording this show. When you go into your drafts, your best ball, look for these guys, pick up some cheap power, because cheap power is the best kind. If you think you have enough, you're wrong. You don't. So keep getting it into your roster. And Bubba, speaking of power, the baseball writers have a lot of power to put somebody in the Hall of Fame. I think it's great David Ortiz gets in. I love David Ortiz. But just want to take your thoughts too. You're a Giants guy. You're wearing that hat. What are your feelings about how the Hall of Fame voting went here for Bonds and Clemens and everybody else who did not get into the Hall of Fame this week?
You mean the Hall of Shame?
Oh, there we go. Let's go.
No, I got to be careful because I respect your show and I got to watch what words I use right now. But
please, you don't want to hear the words I'm going to use about it then.
There's two sides of the story. I am very happy for Ortiz. Like, awesome.
100%. I love Poppy. Everybody loves Poppy.
I try to clarify that because people think I'm like angry about Bonds not getting in over. That has nothing to do with it.
It's not over. That's the thing that always.
That's the thing is it's not over. It's not over at all. It could be together in there. My biggest things that really stink, and it's been more and more apparent, is these writers are old and past their prime. They have no concept of what took place in that era besides, this guy didn't like me. Like, I didn't know it was a national hall of like. That's a really tricky one.
I'm in that Hall of Fame, but everybody loves me.
Well, we love you. Yes, you're the Joe Piece of P Hall of Fame. It's its own wing. But David Ortiz even flat out said in his acceptance that this doesn't basically in roundabout way didn't feel right not getting in without Bonds. Like, Bonds deserves to be in over me. He basically said in those roundabout ways, which says a lot. And there's so many players, so many pitchers that came out yesterday saying, if you never faced Barry Bonds, you don't have the right to vote because apparently you don't know what you're talking about. Like, steroids or no steroids, and I know you're a proponent of the steroids. So I think I know where you stand on this one.
Saved baseball.
That's my biggest thing.
Number one. I Number two, the guy who was in charge
is in the
Hall of Fame, and that's Bud Selig. So
you're go check out my Twitter. There's a picture of him picking his nose, and I said, never forget, people, that this man is in the Hall of Fame because baseball is saved for the ones that aren't getting into the Hall of Fame. Just remember that right now.
And I understand the people who have the point of view of, well, they cheated and all that stuff, and that's fine.
They're all cheating.
They were all, and again, all is a very relative term. People say, no, they all weren't.
80%.
Let me just put it, enough of them were that there had to be a national inquiry into it. So it wasn't like 10%. It probably wasn't 25. It wasn't 30. It was probably closer to at least half, if not more.
Yeah, it's at least 50-50.
Yeah, and that's the thing to me. And then you look at who's already in the Hall of Fame.
Biggest thing right there. You already have steroid users in the Hall of Fame.
Once you open up Pandora's box, you have to be realistic. And I said this yesterday. And I know this is fun fodder, and everyone has strong opinions. So it's good that we're all having opinions and we can voice them here. My opinion on this whole Hall of Fame conversation is baseball has been imperfect. The story of baseball has been imperfect from day one. The first 60 years of baseball, there were only white people playing.
Yep.
Okay, so let's just start there about the imperfections in the history of baseball, right?
Pretty big imperfection.
Right. So, and I guess the point I'm making is this. The Hall of Fame is supposed to tell the story of the game. If you're telling the story of the game, it's full of imperfections. It's also full of incredible, perfect moments and players that transcended these moments and players that were the best of that era. I also think Sosa should be in. I think you can't just make the line and say, well, this steroid guy, but not that steroid guy. Who are the best players in the era? The era is the era. I'm sorry that it hurt some people's money.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that some guys who might have been clean didn't put up the same numbers as some guys who didn't. I'm sorry. And you know what? I give them a lot of credit for their integrity, if they chose not to take that path. That's perfectly commendable, and we should commend them. And maybe we should look at some of those players a little differently. If their names are Scott Rowland, if their names are Bobby Abreu, we should look at those names a little differently than in that era. However, a Hall of Fame without Barry Bonds, and nobody hates Roger Clemens more than me, is absurd. It's just
Most Cy Youngs
absurd.
in baseball. Most Cy Youngs in baseball. You
Come on.
hate him or not, like in that era,
And I hate him, and I think he should be
those
in.
writers voted for his Cy Young awards.
Right. They had
Let's
no
think
problem
about
voting
that.
his Cy Young Awards.
Yeah.
And Bonds won a couple MVPs last time I checked, too.
Quite a few. But see, like, couple last things, because I could go on forever on this, is the Hall of Fame, like you said, was supposed to tell the story about baseball. You have probably, I haven't been there before, but you probably have a section showing 73 home runs, 756 home runs with Bonds memorabilia. Good enough to be in your hall. He's not good enough to be in your hall. Tell me where that makes sense. And second, you mentioned the story of baseball. Well, if you want to talk about illegal things throughout history, prohibition was illegal, and Babe Ruth was going wild then. We could just skip ahead. We could just skip ahead to the cocaine era if you'd like to go there, or the greenies, or like you can just go down the list of things.
There's so many imperfections, and like I said, and I understand that on top of it, they were not very likable guys. Bonds especially was not a likable guy, and you know what? I think at the end of the day, it's great that we're seeing some of our friends like Steve Gardner is going to come on the show next week. They're getting Hall of Fame votes. I hope it changes.
That's how it should keep changing.
I felt a little bit too like they passed the buck to the players.
Yep.
This was the thing. Like, you know what? If you want him in, you put him in. We don't want this on us. And I think that that's poor. I think that, I think that's a terrible way of doing it, because if that's the case, then the writers shouldn't have the first 10 years. It should be a collective ballot then, if you're going to pass the buck, basically.
Bingo. Well, the worst thing is you see these ballots where they vote for some steroid users, but not Bonds and Clemens because they didn't like them. It's like, okay, you either don't like steroids or you do. Pick your poison. You can't start to like.
And then I laugh because like the guy who doesn't vote for Barry Bonds but votes for Billy Wagner, who influenced, 90 innings a year as opposed to an everyday player. I can't wrap my mind around that mentality either. Or even worse, the guys who vote for their buddies. Like, I'm just going to give you a vote because, I was good pals with, Pete Incaviglia. So I'm going to put Pete Incaviglia. Then, Pete Incaviglia probably got a Hall of Fame vote. He probably got 2.
At some point in time, he probably did,
yep. And that, to me, is just absurd. Why would you do that? Where is your integrity of the position? You've been given a gift here to preserve the history of baseball. And the history of baseball is dirty. It's filthy. But it's our history. Yes. Let's embrace it. And honestly, I wish we could just, give everybody very cautious amounts of steroids again. You know how I feel about it. I miss the days where people hit 30 home runs and we'd say, boy, that was a down year.
Down year, yeah. I recommend people, if they haven't seen it, Barry Bonds' retirement ceremony in San Francisco a year or so ago, Willie Mays gave a speech that basically told the Hall of Fame people to get their stuff together to vote him in. I recommend you go listen to that one. One of the greatest players
Willie
ever.
Mays. And look,
one of the greatest, it's his godfather.
I get
but
it.
So there's a bond, but still he even looks past what he knows that took place and still realizes how good he was. Like listen to the man that was one of the best players ever play the game and see what happens.
And I think that it's a disservice to the next generation that comes through, because they're going to look back and say, where are these players? Where are the greats of this era? And there were lots. Baseball in the 90s and 2000s, it might have been the best baseball we've ever seen.
It was electric.
And I just want to put that out there. I mean, and I don't just mean from the hitting standpoint and the home run standpoint. The overall baseball in the 90s and the early 2000s was stunningly entertaining and good. And there was a lot of great players. And they weren't, it was the Ichiros of the world too, just as much.
Yep.
It was a great time for baseball. And I just wish we could, get past this now, because unfortunately they had an opportunity to kind of put it to bed and they didn't do it. And I think that's a bad job by the writers. And look, I know people are going to comment on here and think, they cheated. Well, that's fine. But then what do you do with the guys who are in already who, look, I'm a Mets fan, and I will roll my eyes to anybody who tells me that Mike Piazza was clean necessarily. It's hard. There's so many things that have been written about it, and Ortiz is another one too. Ortiz is in the report. Yep. He's in the Mitchell report.
There's evidence, legal
evidence of him in there. And he's first, let's put him in first ballot.
Yeah.
And I
like him. Nice guy.
He's just a nice guy. It doesn't work like that. But you're in my Hall of Fame. Your first ballot. Your first ballot Hall of Fame guest. Let me tell you about that. And of course, make sure you check out Bubba's work in the Fantasy Baseball Black Book 2022. It's over on Amazon right now. Go check it out. Check out also the Bench with Bubba podcast. Go follow him on the Twitter machine as well, because he's one of the best follows there. I don't care what anybody tells you. At BDentrek, that's BDentrek as well. Check out his work at Line Star. He hosts the Line Star app podcast, as well as a lot of other places, because he's a hardworking man. That's why I love you, Bubba. I love you. And thanks so much for being part of the Black Book again. It's always great to talk baseball with you. And whether it's fantasy baseball or real baseball, it's the passion of the discussion. It's nice to talk about, even though we're in a lockout situation right now.
Definitely, my friend. Always enjoy chatting with you. Miss chatting with you every morning, but it's great to catch up with you from time to time. So looking forward to doing it again sometime.
That's right. How about later tonight at PitcherCon? How about we do that?
Ooh, baby,
Look at that. The double dip for me and KC Bubba. All right. Make sure you go check out FantasyPros.com as well, because I told you can get that cheat sheet creator at FantasyPros.com/draftwizard. It updates with your favorite experts. Whenever they update their rankings, your updates will come through as well. Also, check out that Draft Wizard app and start mock drafting today using that cheat sheet creator. It's a great tool. And I know something about great tools because I've been called a great tool many, many times in my life. All right, that'll do it for us. But the story of the game goes on. For KC Bubba, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.